I work at a food diner off the 45 highway in mid-America. We usually get truck drivers stopping in for food and your occasional traveling families on a road trip. I must admit, our food isn't that good the few times I've tried it, but for hungry travelers, it does the job. We are open 24 hours a day since there is a constant flow of traffic along the highway at all hours of the night. Business tends to slow down during the evening, but we still get at least a dozen Patreons overnight looking for food or a coffee to continue their routes. Our diner has a live music area, but we have not had any live bands play here in over a year. I work the evening shift from 6 p.m. until 3 a.m., which my shift is then covered by the owner's daughter, which works the mornings. Her name is Angela. She's in her 40s and has been working the diner since she was a teenager. She pretty much owns the place since our boss hardly ever comes by, and most duties are left up to Angela, such as hiring new employees and ordering all the supplies to keep the diner running. I wouldn't say Angela is a mean person, but let's just say she's not the most polite human I've encountered in my life. Several times I've seen her get into arguments with customers just trying to order their food, but I guess that's expected after working at the same place for over 20 years. It was a Thursday evening. The restaurant just had its last customer pay their bill and head towards their large semi-truck, which he left running outside with the air conditioning on to keep his dog cool. I could see the dog sitting in the passenger seat barking out the window towards the back of her area of our diner. I'm guessing she must have seen one of the local raccoons roaming around our garbage cans. Those raccoons can be quite the pest since they dig through the trash and make a mess littering the floor. Some of the raccoons are quite scary as they get pretty big and can stand on their two back legs and reach past my waist. I've heard of them also being rabid sometimes, so I keep my distance whenever they are digging around the waist. The trucker hopped in his truck and I could hear him putting on some rock and roll and blasting it out his radio as he began to shift into first gear and slowly pulling out the pit stop area. The night was a calm night as usual and was now around midnight. I was mopping the floor of the diner, meanwhile we waited for another customer to enter. That's when an old Jeep, with lots of smoke coming out its muffler, pulled to the side of our diner. This was a bit different than usual, since most customers park right in front of the diner. I'm working alone at this time since Angela doesn't clock in until the early morning hours when I head home. I heard the Jeep's engine turn off and the door slam rather hard. I could see a man in his mid-50s with scrapes across his face which looked to be fresh. He was holding a white napkin to his forehead that was red from all the blood he was wiping. The old man moved towards the back of his Jeep and I could see him gathering a pistol from the trunk and he placed it into his waistband. He walks inside the diner and sits down in the corner table, keeping an eye on his Jeep. I greeted him as usual and asked if I could offer him something to drink. The man, still looking at his Jeep, said, "I'll take a black coffee to go." I headed to the back to pour the man's coffee as he walked to the bathroom. It had been 5 minutes and the man was still in the bathroom as his coffee sat on his table waiting for him. I was refilling the coffee jug with fresh hot water when I felt a sharp point press against my back. I jumped from the fear and saw it was the old man. He had his pistol aimed on my back and told me to stay silent and calm. He said he wasn't going to hurt me if I obeyed. I ran for the telephone to call 911, but he pointed his pistol and told me to put it down or he would end my life. I dropped the phone to the floor as he walked towards me, still aiming his pistol at my head. He pulled out a rope from his back pocket and began tying my arms to my legs so I couldn't stand or move. He began to go for the cash register. At this moment, I realized we were being robbed. He opened the register, and to his disappointment, he only found $10 in cash, since we empty our registers at night. He shouted, "Where's the rest of the money?" I told him I don't have access. The boss takes it every evening before the night. He walked over to me, and with one hard swift of his gun, he hit me over the head, where I instantly blacked out. I woke up a few minutes later in a pool of my blood from the cut on my forehead from the man hitting me with his pistol. I slowly began to inch over to the dining tables where I could grab a knife to cut myself loose. I called 911 as they rushed over and took the information I gave them. The police officer then explained to me they got the man at the liquor store 30 minutes down in town. He had murdered the clerk in an attempt to rob them, which the police gave chase to him and ended up in a pit maneuver. The man is now in police custody. I'm traveling Central America for the next 6 months. I've been saving my money for this trip for the past 2 years working labor jobs in the fruit fields up in Switzerland. They pay us fairly well here, so I decided to save as much as I can to enjoy the next 6 months and experience new adventures. I landed down in Panama and decided to make my way up north using the bus system little by little. I stay in hostels, paying around $15 a night to share a bunk bed in a shared dorm room. You meet some really cool people while traveling and make some great connections, which always saddens me when it's time to part ways, knowing we most likely never see each other again in this lifetime. I met a new friend in the beach area of the Caribbean in northern Panama, bordering the jungle of Costa Rica. He told me about a possible job opportunity working in a hotel that also has a casino in the next town I was heading to. He told me he worked there for a month and would receive generous tips from the Patreons gambling and from the bar that served free unlimited drinks to customers who spent over a certain amount gambling. I thanked them for the information and decided to give it a shot. I could use extra money. I ended up spending a bit more of the first month of travel, as I have to learn to budget and cook my own food more often, instead of spending money in restaurants. It was an early morning as the bus arrived at 5:30. I packed my belongings and headed out the hostel, walking down the dirt road for 15 minutes until I reached the main Pan America highway, where the bus stops and takes me north for the next 3 hours. I asked the bus driver with my broken Spanish if he could make a stop for me at the casino in 3 hours, and he said sure, no problem. We continued heading north, as I ended up falling asleep on the bus. The worries of being a new traveler kept me up all night wondering where I would head to next. A few hours went by when I was awoken by a man shaking my shoulder. "Miss, your stop here," for the bus driver told me. I looked out the window and could only see jungle trees without a sign of any buildings. He pointed at the dirt road and explained to walk 10 minutes down the road and I would run into the small town where the hotel and casino was located. I saw a car veer off the highway and head down this road, so I figured other travelers were going to the same place as well. After walking for what seemed an hour in the hot sun of the tropics, I could see a rather large hotel in the distance. It stood about 5 stories tall, with a glowing neon sign that said casino. A sigh of relief came upon me knowing I arrived at the right place and didn't get lost. I headed into the casino and ordered a beer from the bar. The bartender spoke great English, as he too was a volunteer, and they offered him free food and a room as long as he worked 4 hours a day in the casino. I asked him how I could reach the owner, as I too was interested in a volunteer position for the next 2 weeks while I lounged around this small beach town. He told me the boss will be here in about 2 hours. He's the rather large fat man that wears a fedora and chain smokes cigars the entire time. I wouldn't be able to miss him. A few hours go by, and I see a high-end Mercedes pulling into the parking lot. Exiting the vehicle, I saw a rather large, tall man that looked so large he could have been a sumo wrestler. He had a cigar in hand and began walking into the casino holding a laptop in his other hand. As he walked in, he greeted me with a kind smile and walked over to my area as I sat at the bar. We had some small talk where I explained I was traveling and was interested in helping him out in exchange for a room to stay in. He said sure, no problem, that he had a private room available on the top floor where I could sleep for the next few weeks while I helped out in the casino a few hours every morning cleaning up. He told me to follow him. He would show me the room and I could leave my belongings. I slowly gathered my backpack and began following the boss as he slowly walked up to the elevator as he smoked a cigar, looking around the casino floor. I followed him to the top floor. There was nothing but silence in the elevator ride, but I felt rather comfortable since we were in a large building and didn't feel nervous. Our elevator door opened as we arrived to the top floor rather quickly, and the boss man steps out and walks towards the end of the hallway. It was rather dark as he flipped a light switch to give us some dim light to walk down the hall. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a large keychain with a bunch of keys rattling. He fiddled through the keys, finding the room key as he opened it. I walked into the room first, as he held the door open for me. There was a bathroom to the right upon entering, and a pair of bunk beds in the main sleeping area. As I looked around the room, I noticed something I wasn't expecting. The bunk beds had metal handcuffs on the side posts, and the beds themselves were bolted down to the floor and the walls. The room had no windows either. I could feel the hair on my neck instantly go up, and I got goosebumps all over my skin. At that moment, the large man grabbed my wrist as I pulled back and shouted, "What are you doing?" His face went from smiling to angry in a matter of seconds. I shouted, "Let me go," as he replied, "I'm sorry, I can't do that." At that moment, I reached for the lampshade sitting on the desk and smacked it across the man's face. He let my arm go to attempt to block the hit as I crawled past his feet as fast as I could make a run for the door. I ran so fast as the man shouted, "Get back here, you're not going anywhere." I could see the elevator still open at the end of the hallway, but decided to take the door that said stairs. I ran down the flight of stairs so fast I made it down to the lobby. I could no longer see anybody in the casino lobby. The gentleman who was working the bar was no longer there, and the entire place looked like they had closed. I smashed through the front door and ran down the street. I had left all my belongings behind, including my passport in my bag. I ran down the road, but there was no other buildings or houses. I finally ran up the dirt road, reaching the main road in order to ask for help. A pickup truck traveling down the highway finally stopped for me and offered a lift. I asked him please call the police that a man tried to abduct me. The pickup driver said, "Sorry, miss, there's no police around here for at least 4 hours. I could offer you a ride back to town and you can speak with them there." Luckily, I had my purse on my side, holding my wallet. I feel like I barely escaped with my life. I'm now headed towards the consulate in the main city to get a new temporary passport so I can travel back home. I work in a corporate-owned restaurant that is attached to a hotel on the backside. The place used to be an old abandoned school that was purchased and remodeled into a hotel. The restaurant is in the front, and the hotel's in the back area, just a short walk from the restaurant. We're located in a small city in the northern area of Toronto, Canada. Our town used to be a hideaway years ago for fugitives that were on the run from the law. Although the town is now so populated, it's not ideal for fugitives to be living here. Some still say many of our local residents are indeed still on the run, using fake names, or their crimes hadn't been solved yet. I've never had any issues, and we get a lot of tourism here due to the old history of our town. They said the fugitives used to mine for gold and silver in the local rivers and sell their findings to continue their lives in this remote area of Canada. It's the peak tourism months now, and we're seeing 75% of our hotel rooms being booked. Everything from young solo travelers to groups of families coming out to enjoy the beautiful wilderness and hiking trails the place has to offer. I was waiting tables when a formally dressed man wearing a button-down dress shirt and slick pants lifted his hand to get my attention. I walked over and greeted him and offered if I could get him anything to drink or if he wanted to order food. He stared at the menu, looking through our sandwich options, as he pointed to our BLT option and said, "Leave out the lettuce." He also ordered an entire pitcher of beer, as I told him I would be right back with his order. The man sat there, staring out the front window while I prepared his order. 5 minutes later, I walked to his table and began to pour his first glass of beer for him, and my chef walked up with the sandwich and placed it on the table he was sitting at. The man thanked me and asked if I lived in the area and had any ideas where he could explore. I told him some of the regular spots most travelers go and visit, and he asked if there were any other areas without groups of people, as he was looking for something more peaceful and quiet. I advised if he followed the river along the road, there's plenty of dirt roads he can veer off. Most areas have waterfalls, and the water is quite warm this time of year, so I told him it would be a great spot he could relax and enjoy some alone time. He continued talking for a while, and he seemed to kind of grow on me. He was polite, and his travel stories were quite intriguing. He offered me to go with him when I was off work, that he brought some rock climbing gear, and offered to show me how to do some basic rock climbing. I already had plans with some work friends, so I thanked him but told him maybe next time, as we already had a reservation at a movie with some friends. He took a bite of his food and nodded his head and took a drink of his beer. He said, "Sounds fun. Let me know if you get any free time and we could go explore the area together." It's been a week now and work continue as usual. A new flow of travelers have come into the hotel and restaurant, and I haven't seen the man again. I checked the log sheets of the hotel to see if he checked out, but the logs say he rented a room for an entire month. I figured he must be in the area still, but haven't seen him in an entire week. 2 weeks go by and still no sign of the man, but his room is still booked. We usually don't see anyone pay for a room they aren't going to use unless they had to go deep into the woods with a group of hunters for weeks and then come back and check out. This man was alone, so I highly doubt he was out hunting in the wilderness for weeks on end. I thought nothing more of it and continued my regular work, waiting tables and cleaning around. We received a new family of travelers. They were 2 parents with 4 children. I could see them all unloading their rental vehicle as the kids walked into the reception area first. I greeted them and asked if they would like to reserve a room. The father said hi and said they had booked 2 rooms already online as I pulled up his information on the computer. I told him, yes, let me get your keys and I'll guide you to the room. As we walked to their rooms, I explained the usual rules and utilities available, such as 24-hour shared kitchen if they want to cook, we had a warm jacuzzi in the lounge area, etc. As we arrived to their room, I got a bad odor coming down the hallway. It smelled like someone had left a dead dog or rotten food in one of the rooms. I walked down further as the smell became stronger and stronger. I reached the door where I knew the smell was coming from and smelled so bad I had to move away from the strong burning smell of something dead or rotten inside the room. I knocked on the door with no response. I went back to the reception area to see who had booked this room, and that's when I noticed it was the gentleman from before who had rented the room for an entire month. At that moment I began to get freaked out as I thought the man had probably died or killed himself in the room, but his car was no longer in the parking lot. I instantly called 911 and explained the situation. They advised they would send a detective and patrol to the hotel immediately. As police arrived, I walked them to the room with the spare keys in hand. I grabbed my face mask to help with the smell. I handed the officer the key to the room as he drew his firearm and unlocked the room door. That's when I saw it. There were 2 deceased female bodies with stab wounds to the neck. They had been tied up and gagged to avoid making noise. The officer instantly told me to leave the area and shut the door again due to the strong smell. He called for backup when a large group of police and detective arrived at our hotel. It's been a month now since this encounter, and I've decided to head out of this area to find new work in the neighboring city. I guess this town still has some of the left fugitives that are up to no good.